The bus came at 6:15 in the morning. I stood at the corner with 4 children, 3 old bags, and 1 small box of toys. The sky was still grey. My youngest son was half asleep in my arms. My daughters held each other's hands. My older son carried a school bag that was too heavy for him. None of us spoke. Behind us, the apartment was quiet. My husband was still asleep on the couch. He did not know we were leaving. He did not know I had saved money for months. He did not know I had already found a small place for us. When the bus doors opened, my oldest daughter looked up at me and whispered, "Mama, are we really going?" I looked back at the street one last time. Then I said, "Yes. We are going." And for the first time in years, I was more afraid of staying than leaving. I met Daniel when I was 20 years old. Back then, he was not the man my children later feared. He was warm. He smiled easily. He opened doors for me. He listened when I talked. At least, I believed he listened. I did not have much at that time. I had no car, no home of my own, and no family close by. I worked in a small clothing store and rented one room with another girl. I wanted someone to love me. I wanted a family. I wanted a life that felt safe. Daniel knew how to make promises sound simple. He said, "We can build something together." I believed him. 6 months later, we were married. People told me it was too fast, but I did not listen. I thought love was enough. I thought 2 people could be poor and still be happy if they cared about each other. For a while, I thought we were happy. We lived in a small apartment above a bakery. The kitchen window looked over an alley. The walls were thin, and the floor made noise when we walked. But I did not mind. Daniel worked part-time at a warehouse. I worked at the clothing store. We counted coins before buying food. We ate rice, eggs, soup, and cheap bread. I washed our clothes by hand when the washing machine broke. Still, I smiled. I told myself, this is only the beginning. Then our first child was born. We named her Lily. She had soft hair and big dark eyes. When I held her, I felt my whole world become smaller and bigger at the same time. I was tired all the time, but I was full of love. 2 years later, our son Noah came. Then came Sophie. Then our little boy, Ben. 4 children. 4 small hearts. For reasons to get up every morning, even when my body felt too tired to move. The house became loud. There were toys under the table, socks under the bed, and school papers on the kitchen counter. Someone always needed food. Someone always needed shoes. Someone always cried when I sat down. But I loved them. I loved brushing Lily's hair before school. I loved listening to Noah talk about animals. I loved Sophie's small songs. I loved the way Ben put his head on my shoulder when he was sleepy. I gave them everything I had. Daniel gave less and less. At first, he came home late and said work was hard. Then he started missing shifts. Then he said his back hurt. Then he said his manager did not respect him. Then one day, he stopped going to work at all. I thought it would be temporary. I thought he needed rest. I told myself a good wife should be patient. But days became weeks. Weeks became months. Daniel slept late every morning. He watched television. He played games on his phone. He left dirty cups beside the couch. When the children asked him questions, he looked annoyed. I worked more hours. I cooked. I cleaned. I took the children to school. I picked them up. I helped with homework. I washed dishes after everyone slept. Daniel watched me do everything. One evening, I asked him, "Can you help Noah with his reading?" Daniel did not even look away from the television. He said, "I'm tired." I said, "I'm tired too." He laughed in a cold way. Then he said, "You wanted children. Don't complain now." I stood in the doorway with a wet towel in my hand. I wanted to shout. I wanted to ask him when he had stopped being a father. But the children were in the next room. So I said nothing. That became my way of living. I said nothing when he shouted at Lily for spilling juice. I said nothing when he told Noah to stop asking stupid questions. I said nothing when Sophie hid behind my legs every time Daniel walked into the kitchen. I said nothing when baby Ben cried harder whenever Daniel's voice became loud. I told myself silence was peace. But it was not peace. It was fear wearing a quiet face. One night, I burned dinner. Ben was sick and wanted to be held. I had one arm around him and one hand on the pot. The rice stuck to the bottom. Smoke filled the kitchen. Daniel came in, looked at the pot, and made a face. "You can't even cook a simple meal," he said. I said, "Ben has a fever." I was trying to hold him. Daniel grabbed the pot and threw it into the sink. The sound made all the children jump. Lily ran to the doorway. Noah covered his ears. Sophie started crying. Daniel looked at them and shouted, "What are you looking at?" The children disappeared into their room. I stood there with Ben against my chest. He was hot and shaking. I wanted to cry, but I did not want him to feel it. So I kissed his head and whispered, "It's okay. Mama is here." After that night, I began crying in the bathroom. I would wait until the children were asleep. Then I would sit on the floor with my back against the door. I put a towel over my mouth so no one could hear me. I cried because I was tired. I cried because I was angry. I cried because I did not know how to leave. We had no savings. I had no car. My parents lived far away and had almost nothing themselves. I had no friend who could take in a mother with 4 children. So I stayed. I told myself the children needed a father. But Daniel was not really a father anymore. He was just a man on the couch. A man who filled the home with cold air. A man who made children walk softly in their own house. The first time I understood this clearly was because of Noah. He came home from school with a drawing. His teacher had asked the children to draw their families. Noah showed me the paper proudly. There was a small house. There was me. There was Lily, Sophie, Ben, and Noah. We were standing in the sun. Daniel was not in the picture. I tried to smile. I asked, "Where is Dad?" Noah looked at the drawing, then at me. He said, "Dad doesn't come outside with us. He stays on the couch." It was such a simple answer. That was what made it hurt. That night, I could not sleep. I lay beside Ben and listened to the apartment. Daniel was snoring in the living room. The refrigerator made a soft noise. A car passed outside. I kept seeing Noah's drawing. A family without a father. Not because the father was gone, but because he was there and still absent. A few weeks later, Lily dropped a bowl. It broke on the kitchen floor. The sound was sharp and loud. Daniel came in fast. His face was red. "Are you stupid?" he shouted. Lily froze. She was 9 years old. Her hands were still wet from washing the bowl. A small piece of glass lay near her foot. I stepped between them. "She is a child," I said. Daniel turned his eyes to me. "Don't talk to me like that." My legs were shaking, but I did not move. "Don't talk to her like that," I said. For a moment, the room became very still. Then Daniel walked out and slammed the door so hard the wall shook. Lily began to cry. I knelt down, checked her feet, and picked up the glass. Then I held her close. "You are safe," I whispered. But my own words felt false. Because she was not safe. Not really. After that, the children changed even more. Lily became too quiet. Noah stopped asking questions when Daniel was home. Sophie watched Daniel's face before she spoke, as if she needed to know the weather in him. Ben cried whenever a door slammed. I began to feel like I was raising children inside a storm. Some days the storm was loud. Some days it was silent. But it was always there. One morning, Sophie came to the kitchen wearing shoes that were too small. Her toes were pressed against the front. She tried to walk without showing pain. I said, "Sweetheart, why didn't you tell me?" She looked down. I didn't want Dad to be mad. I took off her shoe and saw a red mark on her skin. That evening, I told Daniel, "Sophie needs new shoes." He did not look up from his phone. "So buy them." "I don't have enough money until Friday," I said. He shrugged. "Then tell her to stop growing." Sophie heard him from the hallway. She went to bed without asking for dinner. I sat beside her and rubbed her back. She pretended to sleep, but I knew she was crying. That night, I opened my purse and counted my money. $12. That was all I had after food, bus fare, and school things. I looked at the bills in my hand and felt smaller than I had ever felt. The next morning, my back hurt so badly that I could not bend down to lift Ben. Daniel saw me holding the table for support. He laughed and said, "You walk like an old woman." I said, "My back hurts." He said, "Maybe you should complain less." I wanted to throw something at him. I wanted to tell him my back hurt because I carried everything he refused to carry. But Ben was watching me. So I swallowed the words. Later that week, Sophie asked the question that finally broke something open in me. We were folding clothes on my bed. She was holding one of Ben's small shirts. Without looking at me, she said, "Mama, why don't we leave?" I stopped folding. "What do you mean?" She pressed the shirt against her chest. "Dad doesn't like us." The room became quiet. I looked at my 7-year-old daughter. She was not angry. She was not dramatic. She was simply telling the truth as she understood it. "Dad doesn't like us." I wanted to say, "Of course he does." But the words would not come. Because I knew children could feel what adults tried to hide. I pulled her into my arms. She asked again, "Can we go somewhere else?" I kissed her hair. "I don't know yet," I said. But inside, another voice answered. "Not yet. But soon." From that day on, I stopped telling myself that staying was good for the children. I had stayed because I was afraid. I had stayed because I had no money. I had stayed because I thought leaving would break them. But staying was breaking them too. I needed a plan. The next Monday, I asked my manager for more hours. Her name was Karen. She was a kind woman in her 50s who noticed more than she said. She looked at me across the counter and asked, "Are you okay?" I smiled the smile I used for customers. "I just need more money," I said. She studied my face for a moment. Then she said, "I can give you Saturdays." I almost cried from relief. So I started working 6 days a week. I stood on my feet until they burned. I folded shirts. I cleaned dressing rooms. I smiled at customers who were rude. I ate lunch standing in the back room because sitting down made me feel sleepy. At night, I came home and began my second job. Dinner. Homework. Baths. Laundry. Dishes. Lunch boxes for the next day. Daniel noticed the extra hours. One evening, he said, "Why are you working so much?" I kept my voice calm. "The kids need things." He narrowed his eyes. "You just don't want to be home." I did not answer. He smiled without warmth. "Maybe you think you're better than me now." I wanted to say, "No. I just think our children deserve shoes and food." But I said nothing. Silence was still safer. Every Saturday night, after the children slept, I hid money inside an old winter coat in my closet. $5. $10. Sometimes 20. It was slow. It felt almost impossible. But each bill was a small piece of a door. A door out. I also started looking at houses. Not nice houses. Not big houses. Small places. Cheap places. Places near a bus line. After work, I walked down streets I did not know. I wrote down phone numbers from signs. I called from outside the store so Daniel would not hear me. Most places were too expensive. Some landlords said no when they heard I had 4 children. One man laughed and said, "4 kids? That house will be destroyed in a week." I hung up and cried behind the store. Then I wiped my face and went back to work. One afternoon, Karen found me looking at a paper with phone numbers. She did not ask too many questions. She only said, "My cousin rents a small house near Maple Street. It is old, but safe. Do you want the number?" My hands shook when I took the paper from her. That night, I called the number from a bench outside the grocery store. A woman answered. Her name was Mrs. Hayes. Her voice was soft but careful. I told her I had 4 children. I told her I worked full-time. I told her I did not have much money yet, but I could pay a small deposit soon. There was a pause. Then she said, "Come see it on Thursday." On Thursday, I told Daniel I had to work late. Then I took the bus to Maple Street. The house was small. Very small. It had 2 bedrooms, a narrow kitchen, and a living room with old wood floors. The paint was pale yellow. The bathroom door did not close perfectly. There was a crack near one window. But sunlight came through the kitchen. There was a tree in front. There was no shouting. I stood in the doorway and imagined the children sleeping there. I imagined Lily doing homework on the floor. I imagined Noah putting books near the window. I imagined Sophie laughing again. Mrs. Hayes watched me quietly. Then she said, "It is not much." I looked at the empty room. "It is enough," I said. She told me the rent. It was more than I wanted, but less than the others. She agreed to take a smaller deposit if I paid the rest later. When I left, I walked to the bus stop with tears in my eyes. For the first time, leaving was not just a dream. It had an address. At home, things became worse. Maybe Daniel felt something changing. Maybe he saw that I was quieter in a different way. Not weak quiet. Planning quiet. He began watching me more. When I came home from work, he asked where I had been. When I bought groceries, he asked how much money I had spent. When I folded clothes, he looked at my purse. I started hiding my savings in different places. Some under the lining of the old coat. Some inside an empty coffee tin. Some between pages of a children's book Daniel would never open. One night, he stood in the bedroom doorway while I put laundry away. "What are you hiding?" he asked. My heart jumped. "Nothing." He looked around the room. "You've been acting strange." "I'm tired," I said. He stepped closer. "You think you can leave?" The room felt too small. I held a towel in my hands and forced myself to breathe. "Leave where?" I asked. He stared at me for a long moment. Then he laughed. "You wouldn't last 1 week without me." I looked down at the towel. For years, those words would have crushed me. That night, they did something different. They made me angry. Not loud anger. Not dangerous anger. A quiet anger that sat inside my chest and stayed there like a small fire. A few days later, Ben became sick. He had a fever and a bad cough. I stayed awake all night with him. I gave him medicine. I held him in the rocking chair. I sang the same song again and again until my throat hurt. Daniel slept in the living room. In the morning, I asked him, "Can you watch Ben for 1 hour? I need to sleep before work." He looked annoyed. "I'm not a babysitter. He is your son." Daniel picked up his jacket. I said I'm not doing it. Then he left. I sat on the floor with Ben in my lap. I was too tired to cry. Lily came in quietly. She was already dressed for school. She looked at Ben, then at me. "I can stay home and help," she said. She was 9 years old. A child offering to do her father's job. That was the moment I knew I could not wait 3 more months. I could not wait for perfect money. I could not wait for courage to feel easy. I had enough to leave badly. And leaving badly was better than staying forever. That Sunday night, after everyone slept, I counted the money again. It was not enough for comfort. It was enough for a key. The next day, I called Mrs. Hayes and said, "I want the house." She said, "You can move in Friday." Friday. The word made my hands cold. For the rest of the week, I moved like a person living 2 lives. In one life, I cooked dinner and answered Daniel's questions. In the other life, I packed clothes into trash bags and hid them behind boxes in the closet. I packed only what we needed. School clothes, underwear, socks, the children's birth papers, my work papers, a few family photos without Daniel in them, Ben's blanket, Noah's favorite book, Sophie's small stuffed rabbit, Lily's hairbrush. I told the children on Wednesday night. We were sitting on the bedroom floor. Daniel was watching television in the living room. I spoke softly. On Friday morning, we are going to a new house. Noah's eyes became wide. Are we visiting? I shook my head. No. We are going to live there. Sophie put both hands over her mouth. Lily looked at the door. Does Dad know? No, I said. And you must not tell him. The children became very still. I hated that they understood the danger of speaking. But they did understand. Ben was too young to understand everything, but he touched my face and said, "New house?" I smiled. Yes, baby. New house. That night, Lily slept beside Sophie. Noah slept with his backpack in his arms. Ben kept waking up and asking if it was time. I did not sleep at all. I listened to Daniel moving in the living room. I heard him open the refrigerator. I heard the television. I heard him cough. Every sound made my heart race. At 3 in the morning, everything became quiet. At 5, I got up. The apartment was dark. The air felt heavy. I dressed the children without turning on the big light. Lily helped Sophie tie her shoes. Noah carried the bag with school clothes. I lifted Ben and held him on my hip. For a moment, I stood in the doorway of the children's room. This was where I had kissed fevers, folded laundry, whispered promises, and hidden tears. This was where my children had learned to be quiet. I wanted to feel sad. But I did not. I felt ready. We walked past Daniel. He was asleep on the couch with one arm over his face. The television was still on, but the sound was low. A cup sat on the floor beside him. I looked at him for 1 second. I thought of the young man who once promised to build a life with me. Then I looked at my children. And I knew which life I had to save. I opened the door. No one made a sound. The hallway smelled like old carpet and cold air. We walked down the stairs slowly. Every step felt too loud. When we reached the street, the morning sky was pale. The bus stop was 2 blocks away. Sophie held Lily's hand. Noah carried the box of toys. Ben rested his head on my shoulder. Then the bus came. And we got on. No one ran after us. No one shouted. No one stopped us. I paid the fare with shaking hands and led the children to the back. Lily sat by the window. Sophie leaned against her. Noah put the box on his knees. Ben fell asleep. As the bus moved, the streets passed slowly. The bakery. The grocery store. The corner where Daniel once bought me flowers when we were young. Then the apartment disappeared from view. Lily looked at me and whispered, "Mama, are we free now?" I did not know how to answer. Freedom did not feel simple. It felt like fear, hope, hunger, and tired feet. But I took her hand and said, "We are starting." Mrs. Hayes was waiting at the small yellow house. She gave me the key without many words. Maybe she saw enough in my face. The children stood behind me while I opened the door. The house was empty. No beds. No table. No sofa. No curtains. But the morning light was on the floor. For a few seconds, nobody moved. Then Noah ran to the window. Sophie touched the wall as if it were magic. Ben sat in the middle of the floor and smiled. Lily looked around the room, then turned to me. "No shouting," she said softly. I swallowed hard. "No shouting," I said. That first day, we had almost nothing. Karen came after work with 2 bags of used blankets and a pot for cooking. Mrs. Hayes brought an old lamp from her garage. A neighbor I had never met gave us 4 plates that did not match. That night, we ate bread, peanut butter, and apples on the floor. Noah said it felt like camping. Sophie laughed for the first time in weeks. Lily leaned against my shoulder. Ben fell asleep with peanut butter on his cheek. I looked at them under the soft light of the old lamp. The room was poor, but it was peaceful. There was no man on the couch waiting to shout. There were no heavy footsteps in the hallway. There was no cold silence pressing on our backs. Only breathing. Only children. Only us. I did not sleep much that night. I lay on the floor beside them and listened. Outside, a dog barked. A car passed. Somewhere far away, a train moved through the dark. Inside, my children slept without fear. I cried then. Not the bathroom kind of crying. Not the crying I had to hide. These tears were quiet, but they were different. They felt like something leaving my body. The next morning, I went to work. Karen looked at me and knew. "You did it," she said. I nodded. I left. She came around the counter and hugged me. I almost broke down in the middle of the store. But I had customers to help. I had rent to pay. I had 4 children waiting in a small yellow house. So I wiped my face and worked. Daniel called that afternoon. I looked at the phone until it stopped ringing. Then he called again. And again. Then came the messages. "Where are you? Bring my kids back. You can't do this. You'll be sorry." Then, later, a different message. "Come home." I stared at those 2 words for a long time. Home. He still thought home was a place where he sat and everyone else moved around him. He did not understand. Home was not the couch. Home was not the apartment. Home was not his anger. Home was where my children could laugh without looking at the door. I did not answer. The weeks after we left were hard. Harder than I expected. The house was cold at night. The children shared blankets. I worked extra hours and still worried about food. Some evenings, dinner was soup and toast. Some mornings, I counted coins for bus fare. But the children began to change. Slowly. Lily started singing while brushing her hair. Noah asked questions again. Sophie ran from room to room instead of walking softly. Ben stopped crying when someone knocked on the door. One Saturday, I woke up and heard laughter from the living room. For 1 second, I felt afraid. Loud sounds used to mean trouble. Then I opened my eyes and listened. It was Noah and Sophie playing with Ben. Lily was telling them to be quiet because Mama was sleeping. I lay there and smiled. A month later, Lily brought home another family drawing. This time, she gave it to me carefully. I looked at the paper. There was the small yellow house. There was a tree in front. There were 4 children in the yard. I was standing on the steps. The sun was bigger than the house. I asked, "Where am I?" Lily pointed to the woman on the steps. "You're watching us," she said. I smiled. Then I noticed something. There was no father in the picture. But this time, the picture did not feel empty. It felt honest. It felt peaceful. That evening, we taped it to the wall. Daniel kept sending messages for a while. Some were angry. Some were sweet. Some blamed me. Some said he missed us. Some said the children needed him. But the children never asked to go back. One day, Noah said, "Dad misses us now?" I said, "That is what he says." Noah thought about it. Then he said, he should have missed us when we were there. I had no answer. Because he was right. Months passed. We bought a used table from a church sale. Karen gave us a small couch. Mrs. Hayes helped me fix the bathroom door. The children made paper flowers and taped them near the kitchen window. The house slowly became ours. Not perfect. Not easy. But ours. One Sunday, I took the children to the park. The weather was warm. Lily pushed Ben on the swing. Noah climbed a tree and shouted for me to look. Sophie picked small yellow flowers from the grass. I sat on a bench and watched them. A woman sitting nearby smiled and said, "Your children look happy." I looked at them running under the sun. For years, I had thought happiness needed a full family at any cost. But I was wrong. A child does not need a perfect home. A child needs a safe one. I looked at the woman and said, "They are learning to be happy again." She smiled. That is a beautiful thing. I watched Lily laugh as Ben shouted higher, higher. I watched Noah jump down from the tree. I watched Sophie run toward me with flowers in her hand. Then I looked at the small yellow flowers and felt something soft open inside me. I was still tired. I still worked too much. My feet still hurt at night. Some bills still scared me. But my heart was no longer trapped in that apartment. My children were not walking on eggshells anymore. They were running. And that was enough. Later, when people asked why I stayed so long, I never had a simple answer. I stayed because I was young when it began. I stayed because I was poor. I stayed because fear can sound like common sense when you hear it every day. I stayed because I thought children needed a father, even one who hurt them with his words. But I left because one day I understood something. My children were not asking for a perfect life. They were asking for a peaceful morning, a quiet dinner, a safe room, a mother who could breathe. That was what I gave them when I opened the door and walked out. And every morning now, when sunlight comes through the kitchen window of our small yellow house, I remember that bus ride. I remember Lily's hand in mine. I remember the fear. I remember the key in my pocket. Then I hear my children laughing in the next room. And I know we did not just leave Daniel. We came back to ourselves.